Okay, so I have here Columbia Classics Volume 2. And unlike the first volume, I'm just going to talk about all of the movies at once. Alright, so first the box. I previously said how much I like the shade of red that they went with. It's not too bright, it's not too maroon. It fits really, really well with the rest of the box. The aesthetic is very pleasing. And I think it works even better because the box is shiny and glossy. If it were matte, it would probably be a little underwhelming. And the box itself, I think, is a bit more sturdy than the one for Volume 1. In fact, on the Volume 1 box, the sides came off of the littler boxes that the Blu-rays are in. So I had to get some more adhesive to put those back together. It took a while for me to find the thing that I need, but I finally did. It is this. It's a product called Glue Dots, and you can get it at any craft store. And then you just roll it onto the 3 spots where it adheres to the side of the box. So in the back of the box, you have the book, which just like in Volume 1, gives you details of all the movies that are in the set. And on the inside cover is quotes from movies from this set and movies from the previous set and movies that I'm thinking that they would like to put into upcoming volumes, or just quotes that they like, generally speaking. And then finally we have the J card, which was not attached to the box. I was pleased to see. The only reason it was pressed up against the box is because of the cellophane wrap around it. And the J card itself you don't need. It just has technical specifications on it, and some of the features are listed, but you'll find those on the back of the boxes of the actual discs. It has the size of the image, it has the length of the films, it has some features, it has the audio and video formats it's presented in. All except for Taxi Driver have Dolby Atmos mixes. Okay, so now for the movies, and the big standouts in this set are Oliver, Sense and Sensibility, and Anatomy of a Murder. With Anatomy of a Murder, I compared it with my Criterion Blu-ray that I have, and the difference is pretty striking. I think if Criterion had done a 4K transfer, as they have been doing with a lot of their Blu-rays, the difference would still be there, but it would probably be a little bit more minimal. The image of Anatomy of a Murder is just beautiful. Unlike the Criterion version, it is really not grainy at all. You see a bit of noise for the opening credits, but that's about it. The picture is really clean, really sharp. The HDR really balances it out. Nice deep blacks, good shadows, not too blown out in the highlights. One thing that I have always loved about it is the camera work. There are just many shots with really, really nice depth of field. When any one of the lawyers is talking to the witness and the camera is pointed to the courtroom, that is a really nice depth of field, and it just has a slight parallax look to it. It's a beautifully shot movie. And the sound on it is really nothing to scoff at either. It is marvelous. It is a true 3-dimensional Dolby Atmos mix. The best part is that it echoes in the rear speakers, mainly when they're in the courtroom. Overall, it's just a really nice, immersive 3-dimensional sound. And then we have Oliver, which is also really, really gorgeous. It was shot in Technicolor, so it's going to be really colorful and really lush. Again, it's really bright and crisp and clean, and not as noisy as its Blu-ray counterpart, which of course just looks slightly lower quality, and the colors seep into each other and they aren't separate. The HDR, of course, corrects all this greatly. And the sound on this is similar. It may not echo behind you as much as Anatomy of a Murder, but it's still nice and rich and full, and has that immersive 3D quality that Atmos strives for. And then we get to Taxi Driver, which is perhaps the most interesting of all of these films. When you look at the regular Blu-ray of it, it's a lot more saturated, and they're trying to pop the colors out a bit more, which was the original intention. But as the story goes, they desaturated the film so that they could get an R rating as opposed to an X. And now that's what we're left with, because there are no fully saturated negatives anymore of that film. But despite the fact that it's a little undersaturated, it's still far more pleasing to look at than the regular Blu-ray. It strikes you immediately when the plume of steam comes up and reveals the title Taxi Driver, and the taxi comes riding into frame. On the regular Blu-ray, the steam just looks a little bit more yellow. And then you look at the 4K, it looks white as it should be. So the desaturation of the colors don't hurt it at all. What really struck me was the shot of the meter. It's bright, it's sharp, it's quite sharp. One of my favorite comparisons is from near the end of the movie when Travis is listening to the senator's speech. Yes, the colors are nicer and they don't seep into each other, but what really struck me is the post behind him. I think I just like the shot. It's a really good shot generally, but the post looked great. It just looked sharper and cleaner and more natural. But I was just struck by the difference in clarity with that post. Now, this is the only one of the movies that doesn't have a Dolby Atmos mix, but it still has really nice sound. It's still Dolby as well. I don't know the specifics, but it probably came down to Martin Scorsese. We all know how much of a purist he is. I'm fully on board with that too. As I said, I really prefer when they only add the original sound mix, but they did such a good job with these that I enjoy listening to the new Atmos mixes as well. So Taxi Driver may not have that immersive 3D Atmos sound, but it's still an excellent surround mix. And then we go on to Stripes, which had a bigger budget than Taxi Driver, but was processed in the same way, using a technique called metro-color. But of course it didn't need to be desaturated, that's just one of the connections. Although it does seem to have that look. It's a really nice image too, bright and clear and clean, but that process just isn't as vibrant and lush as Technicolor. Stripes still looks very pleasing though, not a whole lot of grain and noise. And it sounds good too, it's not quite at the level of Oliver or Anatomy of a Murder, but that wasn't the original intent of the soundtrack anyway. And then we get to the other really big standout of this set, which is Sense and Sensibility. This was also shot in Technicolor, just like Oliver, and looks beautiful and lush, really colorful and vibrant. The colors on this one really pop, and it's really clear. It's another very nice upgrade from its Blu-ray counterpart, which has colors running into each other and seeping into places they don't need to be. Again, a Dolby Atmos mix, not as immersive as Oliver and Anatomy of a Murder, but very crisp and clear. And then finally we have The Social Network. This is the one that I said in my first video that I was really interested in seeing. Because it was shot digitally, so it's not exactly the same as a film, but it has really nice colors. And it really shows on this disc, and they're really nice and separated. On the Blu-ray, they all just run into each other. There's no separation, making skin tones look unnatural. So aside from the size of the image, that's probably the biggest difference. The image, of course, just looks higher quality, but the colors are the biggest change in it. And it's the fifth one with the Dolby Atmos mix. It's big, immersive, just as three-dimensional as Oliver and Anatomy of a Murder. So there you go, the 6 movies in the Columbia Classics Volume 2 collection. As I said in my first video, it's a very interesting grouping of movies. Every single one of them is a classic to be sure. Oliver I just thought was an overall good movie, and the music was wonderful, which reminded me of a few other composers. It was very reminiscent of Gilbert and Sullivan, Stephen Sondheim, Andrew Lloyd Webber, but all the music fit the movie really well, and each character that sang the pieces. And I brought up the film connection between Stripes and Taxi Driver for a reason. As I was looking up Stripes, I saw the guy who played Sergeant Hulka, a man named Warren Oates, who unfortunately died the year after that was released. But I saw that he was in a movie in 1973 called Dillinger, where he played John Dillinger. At first I wasn't able to find where to see it, but then I turned on the Criterion channel and there it was. They have their true crime series up right now. So I watched that. It's quite good. And Warren Oates looks more like John Dillinger than Johnny Depp for sure. But that's not what struck me. What struck me is that it was a very violent movie from 1973, and there was a fair bit of blood, and it was pretty bright red, which to my understanding was the complaint from the ratings board for Taxi Driver. But I think that the difference is that not only was Dillinger a historical film, but the blood that was in it was bright red, but not as thick. It wasn't as thick, there wasn't as much density to it, and there wasn't as much of it for sure. So it's just another example of how hypocritical the ratings board is. And also I brought up Technicolor a few times for Oliver and Sense and Sensibility, because that's certainly the reason that those stand out and look so good and are able to be restored so well. Those are two of the major standouts in this set. They were shot in Technicolor. A League of Their Own was a major standout in Volume 1. That's also Technicolor. And then you've got plenty of other films that aren't on 4K discs, but they were in Technicolor and they look beautiful. For instance, The Court Jester in Paramount Presents. So to finish off, this is a really great set, and I hope you can get your hands on it because I think it's selling fast. And I don't think the individual movies are going to be coming out on 4K discs. From Volume 1, you have Doctor Strangelove, but I believe that's the only one. Okay, thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.